This is the IceCube South Pole Neutrino Observatory. I'm going to go into great detail on what they tell you it is, because then I'm going to tell you what it really is. IceCube is the world's largest neutrino detector. IceCube is comprised of 5,160 digital optical modules, we'll call them DOMs from this point out, suspended along 86 strings, or steel cables effectively, embedded in a cubic kilometer of ice beneath the South Pole. It detects neutrinos through the tiny flashes of blue light called Cherenkov light or radiation produced when neutrinos interact in the ice. There are 275 physicists in 12 countries and 48 institutions collaborating on this science. Just for clarification, this facility is run by the University of Wisconsin-Madison. They are the academic arm that's supposed to be in charge of this system. The colored dots illustrate the pattern of holes and season in which the holes were drilled in the ice for the placement of the neutrino detectors. And I want to point out that there was a very interesting image that was presented by Dr. Hein in his presentation in one of the slides where you were showing some of the specialty shapes of things. And I want people to pay attention to the pattern because what I noticed was that that image appeared just like a bird's eye view looking down on the detector array. What a coincidence. Sacred geometry matters. A dedicated team of over 300 IceCube drillers, technicians, and scientists contributed at the South Pole to IceCube construction between December of 2004 and December of 2010, drilling 2,450 meters into the Antarctic glacier took on average 48 hours, while deployment of the sensors lasted about 11 hours. The sensors, called DOMs, had to be quickly installed before the ice completely froze around them. Make special note of what was just said there. It's actually very easy to drill ice. What a coincidence. We're often told that things are not possible like that down in Antarctica. It takes too much time, it's too long. It's just wholly not true. The way that they drill through the ice right here is just simply by adding heat. The ice itself is typically at around minus 60 degrees. So all you have to do is add warmth, and the ice is actually, because of the 0% humidity, it's the least dense ice that you can have at the surface. So as you apply the heat, it actually retracts and creates a large volume of space very rapidly until you get down to some of the more dense stuff at the bottom. But again, you add heat, it dissipates. So the fern drill and the hot water drill heads. The fern drill was used to drill through the upper layer of compacted snow or fern down to where the ice actually begins, which is about 50 meters below the surface. The solid ice was melted using a straight, high-pressure stream of hot water from the specifically designed enhanced hot water drill. These are the DOMs. They're about the size of a basketball. There's 5,160 of them. They have names and identifiers, so some of them are called, C-3PO, Chewbacca. Basically, the scientists and folks are allowed to just write a name on it, and then they would register it as that. The picture on the right is actually a DOM that is just inside the door of the entry of DA that I mentioned before, Destination Alpha, on display for everybody to see. This is a great depiction of the scale of what is embedded in the ice. So you can see on the bottom there is an illustration that shows the Eiffel Tower and its relative proportion to this system. This is the world's largest phased array transmitter. This overview you can see on the top was very similar to Dr. Hein's depiction. I believe the hexagon matters a lot in this. Here's some of the cubers. Setting up the cabling that goes from each of the holes down. This has been the topic of a lot of discussion, this picture, because a lot of folks in, I guess you would say, the electrical components community have confirmed that, if this is just simply a passive device, then that cable is very large and looks more like a power supply. And we'll be getting to the power output of the IceCube neutrino detector shortly. But once the sensors were deployed, the cables were pulled to the icecube lab to connect the sensors to the servers in the lab. The icecube lab hosts the computers collecting raw data from the detector. And you could see in the other pictures the amount of wiring and processing information. I would say that the icecube lab processing room might have been double the size of this tent, with just rows and rows and rows of server towers. The computational power of what was going on in there is also heavily in question. This is a depiction of what they would call the bloom. So when a neutrino basically impacts the nucleus of a water molecule in the ice, a reaction occurs which sheds off the Cherenkov radiation. The neutrino and the nucleus of the water atom are destroyed, and a muon is released. But effectively, the DOMs are reacting to the blue light. So here you'll see the red area would be the highest concentration of reaction from the DOMs, and then the other DOMs would light relative to their distance. And then at that point, they could triangulate the direction from which the neutrino came. IceCube searches for neutrinos from the most violent astrophysical sources, events like exploding stars, gamma-ray bursts, and cataclysmic phenomena, including black holes and neutron stars. So they say. The IceCube telescope is a powerful tool to search for dark matter and could reveal the physical processes associated with the enigmatic origin of the highest energy particles in nature. 6 years after its completion, IceCube has isolated more than 80 high-energy cosmic neutrinos with energies between 100 TeV and 10 PeV from more than 1 million atmospheric neutrinos and hundreds of billions of cosmic ray muons. For those of you that may not know, neutrinos currently seem to be the most prevalent particle in all of our understanding of everything. There are technically billions and trillions of them passing through this space that we're in right now. They're actually just so small that they can pass in between the, I guess you'd call it the electron shell and the nucleus of every atom. There's just almost never any contact because they're that small. This is the South Pole Traverse. Basically, the United States Antarctic program spends a lot of money flying in fuel by Hercs. If I remember correctly, they can only carry about 35,000 gallons of fuel to pass off. So they're working on a program when I was there that was exploring the possibility of just dragging fuel bladders across the surface. And since then, it has become highly effective, and they have moved in that direction to more appropriately move the fuel. Here's a trial run for a C-17 airdrop during the summer season, and we have photographs of this because it's viewable. During my winter season, it was great that they actually did this trial run because we had 2 emergency airdrops for medical reasons, and I can assure you that that was a nightmare to fire up these planes that were nowhere near our proximity and get them to drop stuff off. We basically set up some burn drums so that they had a target to aim for, and it was very unnerving as we knew the airdrop was occurring because we had no idea how accurate it was going to be, and we were kind of just waiting for stuff to come through the roof. Every winter over had to volunteer for an emergency team. We had 4 emergency response teams. Team 1 was what we would just basically call first responders, and they would move immediately to wherever the alarm system dictated what the problem was. They would gather information to transfer it to Team 2, which was the fire brigade, which was my team. I was a lead on the fire brigade, and basically we would start gearing up, waiting to get intel from the Team 1 crew to let us know, what gear we're going to need. On the bottom left, we have Team 3, which was the medical team, and we also had Team 4, which was just straight up logistics. During our winter season, we actually had our crew perform an appendectomy on one of our crew members, and boy, was that quite the day. We had 1 doctor officially, but you can see there's plenty of other personnel in that room. So there's other people that were simply on their day-to-day operations, were a work order scheduler, a grub lugger, a scientist by definition, but on that day, they were a surgical team. These are some of the Aurora Australis. And although these pictures do look fantastic, I can assure you it looks so much better to the eye. And what the photographs will never be able to give you is the sound. They actually are very audible. I called it sizzling. And you could actually hear the sizzling as an indication even before the aurora would show up. And it was like, I don't know how to put it. I felt like it was Mother Nature talking to me. Almost like, here I come. Like the sizzling would start, and you'd be like, oh, here it comes, you know? And they would also follow you, which I think I've heard the native Alaskans say such things up in the northern areas where I work. And I can attest to that. It was like the aurora was following you sometimes. The South Pole has 1 night and 1 day for 6 months each. When we stay the winter, we call it spending the night. So in the program, I get to tell folks I spent a whole day at the South Pole. And it is actually very challenging to get used to the sun. I used to joke around and say you basically need a welding helmet to go outside. For, I guess, a reference, you know, normally when you look up at the sky and you see the sun, you know, it's this round plasma ball, but it's this circle of brightness. At the South Pole, because of the crystal conditions in the air, imagine if you were to just take that same stuff of brightness, but it's no longer just a circle. It actually comes straight down as a bar to the horizon and then across the ice from the horizon right to your feet. So it's that much more exponential brightness just stacked upon itself. And when you would be turning and doing work and you would be going in that direction, I mean, it was wholly painful. I think my eyes are actually heartily negatively impacted. You will very rarely see me outside without sunglasses on. And in hindsight, I can assure you that Raytheon Polar Services was not giving us the right PPE. This was our sunrise dinner. So the end of the night that we spent there, the culinary crew was, you know, tasked with giving us a sunrise feast. And it was amazing for us because we had sun again. And then prior to this event, they had actually sent out forms to the whole crew. You know, what do you suggest that we have for the sunrise dinner? And everybody filled out their stuff and handed it in and, you know, hoped, you know. And then it turned out when we all sat down, they just made everybody exactly what they asked for. So it was actually really cool. Everybody, you know, it was a big deal for us. That's my picture there. I had the bacon wrapped fillet with coconut shrimp. It was amazing. This is the first flight out. So that's a, oh geez, why can't I think of the name of that plane right now? Anyone? I know it was I think it was a DC-9, but they hot rodded them for Antarctic situation. And also a very stout plane. And that brings us to the credits on that. And I'm going to back us up now to the most important part of this conversation. The icecube neutrino detector. As I stated earlier in this program, they call it a science facility. I found that in the owner's manual, basically, the operator's manual, right? Everybody buys something, it comes in an operator's manual, whether it's a car, a tractor, a television. In the detector's paperwork, I found a page that states very clearly that each of the 5,160 DOMs actually has the capacity to transmit at up to 2,047 volts each. That, ladies and gentlemen, makes it the world's largest phased array transmitter. This thing is not simply listening. So, I did do a lot of research. I did speak to the former crew hands that were there with me. The reason that we started engaging in conversations years after being there, oof, this is rough, is everybody is now suffering from Havana syndrome-like symptoms. People were reaching out because they were in bad shape medically, and they wanted to know what my condition was. So since I became cognizant that they had yet to put all their cards on the table and were asking me to put all my cards on the table, and I was thoroughly convinced that at my time that I was there that these folks were spooks because I had time in the submarine service, and I'm familiar with spook activity. As supporting information to spook activity, part of what I had to do every day was go through the entirety of all of the buildings, all of the outbuildings. We had a communications room and communications operators. It was my job to go in there every day, check the lights, check the fire sprinkler system. But because I wasn't a knucklehead, I made sure to randomize that visit every single day. I would charge in that door unannounced with great silence and watch as they freaked out and started closing things down, amping up their respiratory rates. What are you doing here? What are you doing? I'm doing my job. What are you doing? How come every time I walk in this room, you guys start shutting everything down? And everybody would just shut up. But long story short, post visit to Antarctica and having to converse with these folks about what was going on now, they put all their cards on the table. And I told them that, I'm learning things, and, we need to get to the bottom of this. And then it was at that point that I was basically read into the activity of what was really going on. And this is a directed energy weapon system. It can generate earthquakes. In February of 2011, when this system went from construction to operations and maintenance, effectively the first time they ever transmitted, we caused the earthquakes in Christchurch, New Zealand in February of 2011, 2 of them. I was initially told that this was friendly fire, and I did believe that for a little bit, until I continued in my research and found stuff that shockingly leads me to believe that it absolutely was not an accident. And the piece of information that I came across in that regards was a WikiLeaks post, apparently from the desk of Hillary Clinton. And I'm paraphrasing because I'm horrible with remembering things verbatim, but it basically said that she was very happy about the results of the earthquakes in Christchurch and very happy that they occurred on cue. So this corroborates what I was hearing from my own crew hands, that we have the capacity to do these things. It doesn't take a lot of research. If you simply want to go on the internet and look at all of the science that is available, you can look up how to induce earthquakes. This was also very fortuitous that Dr. Simon brought up yesterday. We had a slight engagement on the topic of ball lightning being generated by earthquakes, and that symmetry would tolerate the idea that if you could generate ball lightning and deliver it somewhere, well, in its explosive capacity, it's simply a discharge of energy, a simple required straw that breaks the proverbial back of the camel and can instigate an earthquake, certainly with great ease wherever there is a fault line. Since I've gone into the disclosure realm, I am still supported by crew hands that worked on these systems and want this information out because justice is required. Humanity deserves the truth. They want to impress upon everybody that it is extremely easy to generate an earthquake. We just need to understand that the technology exists and is being wielded. Energy discharges are energy discharges. It's just that simple. If it turns out that we have systems that have the capacity to deliver them, we have new weapons of war. And this is what I'm trying to let everybody know, is I've simply found the location of one of these systems. And everybody should start understanding that the world is not what we think. This is one of 3 directed energy weapon systems that I discovered and shared publicly in Washington, D.C. This system, in my conversations with Dr. Greer and the wonderful team that he has, appears to also have the capacity for faster than light communications through quantum entanglement. I don't know if anybody's heard years ago of Gary McKinnon, who was a whistleblower who hacked into NASA. And he provided a spreadsheet list of what were the titles of an off-world fleet, each of the ship's titles, and their respective captains. I would simply suggest that if we do, in fact, have a fleet out there, which it seems we do, we would, of course, need a means of communication. This system would be one of them. So, third issue, with this system in the grand scheme of what we're learning in referenceable, patented science that exists is the very nefarious activity of what is now being referred to as voice to skull, which is one of the symptoms on the Havana syndrome list that they benignly refer to as victims hearing peculiar sounds in their heads. What they're alluding to, without saying with any great specificity, is the ability to put a voice in your head. This was used during Desert Storm very effectively, and this is a technology that is wholly referenceable and real. And I believe that this system is just one of the more powerful units that can accomplish it. When it comes to directed energy weapons, we need to think of weapons differently than we have conventionally. You know, we're used to, a rifle where you pull the trigger and one caliber of bullet comes out per trigger pull, and it's very conventional. Directed energy weapons are very manifold. They can do multiple things because once we step into the energy realm, it kind of almost gets into like whatever you can think of, and then it's just a matter of changing a couple of circuits and a couple of things, and then that makes the unit itself multifaceted. And then we have the complex problem is that these systems seem to be also cogged together to almost make a bigger, more nefarious machine. If we have this system over here at the South Pole Station, if we have another system in Gakona, Alaska, and if we take, for all practical purposes, a beam from one and a beam from other, and then we cross them, we start to get these more compounded, complex problems for humanity. The other system that I came across in the directed energy weapons category, I was working one day, I had to swap out a pump. That pump had electricity going to it. I had to isolate that circuit to facilitate the pump replacement. And when I was tracking the power back to the panel, I became confused because the panel, its marking said this is supposed to be off, this is supposed to be on, but nothing was matching up. So I was concerned, am I getting the right circuit here? Am I going to de-energize correctly? So I ran it up my chain of command, had a conversation with the facilities engineer. He came down, started looking at stuff, and then the circuit that was causing the confusion, I was then at that time informed that that goes to the ELF system, which we were told was de-energized. And now I learned it was on. Well, again, I was in the submarine service. I'm very aware that ELF is a highly guarded system. It can certainly be used for submarine communications, and I do not doubt that our spooks were communicating with submarines regularly. I don't doubt that. But again, upon further research, we find that these systems are more complex, and then again, when you cog them together with other systems, great feats of technological advancement can occur, and now that's 2 directed energy weapon systems that I testified in Congress for having discovered at the South Pole. The third one was what we call the Atmospheric Research Observatory, the one that they were talking about, the clean air studies. I witnessed myself on many an occasion when I would be doing my rounds in the pitch black darkness of a winter at South Pole, there was an extremely large green laser that shot out of the roof of the Atmospheric Research Observatory. It was a sustained burst for minutes on end. It does not take a lot of research for anybody in this room to find that that is very challenging to accomplish. My research has shown that green lasers are the most challenging and require the most power to simply fire for a millisecond. And I was watching sustained bursts for minutes on end. There is some sort of alternative power source, apparently, at the South Pole Station than those 2 cat generators I showed you beforehand. This is also what I showed in Washington, D.C., were maps that I had which appear that Old Pole, which was supposedly blown up during my summer season, I think was a cover story to stop the winter over activities that were going on annually that were folks accessing Old Pole. In the boredom of wintertime at South Pole, it became very common for the polies to just break into Old Pole, go under the ice and see what they can find, and I think they were trying to blow it up as a cover story. There's a very long tunnel that is on one side of the Old Pole. I believe that at the very least, since Old Pole predated the Antarctic Treaty, which put the limit at that date for having a nuclear power supply, McMurdo Station had a PM-8 reactor at it before, and it's a very small modular system that can be flown around by Hercs. I believe that there was a system just like that at South Pole Station and may still be up and running and be the actual power supply for these 3 directed energy weapon systems that would take god-awful amounts of power. The other list of possibilities for the power source, believe it or not, this one's very interesting and comes to me through John Warner IV, who was the son of John Warner III, who was former Republican senator of the state of Virginia, and John Warner III was also formerly the Secretary of the Navy. John the son reached out to me early when I first came out disclosing information because he saw value to what I was discussing at the South Pole. And he wanted to express to me information that his father had passed on to him. He was John, the son, was very interested in Antarctic activities. And he asked his father, he says, you know, it seems like, you know, the Navy's always still involved in Antarctica. You know, what's going on down there? And his father informed him that there was submarine activity below the ice, that they were tunneling to get underneath. A lot of people don't realize that the actual land continent of Antarctica, the vast majority of it's below sea level. There's just so much ice accumulation that it's effectively bedded down to the land that's below sea level. So a submarine coming in through the ocean could bore into the ice, be above the land and below the waterline still. So you absolutely could go through there. Also, the science community has recently just disclosed publicly that you have to realize that the continent of Antarctica has the same amount of massive waterways as any other continent. So the riverways could be under the ice, and just like we saw with the drilling of the ice for the neutrino detector boreholes, that water coming through would just bore out and make space that certainly could be traversed by submarines, which it seems the Nazis were saying way back when. When John asked his father why this submarine activity was so prevalent in Antarctica, his father's answer was space operations. That's a big deal. Goes back to that whole faster-than-light communications. We have stuff off-planet. I want to back up. There's something I forgot to mention about the neutrino detector. Again, in communication with folks and doing research about what's going on, it appears these UFOs, whether man-made or off-world, in-world, whatever you want to call it, the exotic propulsion systems that make them move around apparently emit neutrinos. So having a neutrino detector at the South Pole Station that's omnidirectional, so it doesn't care which direction anything's coming from, and neutrinos do not let anything block their activity. This makes this a very wonderful air traffic control center for any exotically propelled vehicle coming in or about our planet or atmosphere. There's a lesser known gentleman in the entire Antarctic and or UFO community conversation, and his name is Lloyd Berkner. Lloyd Berkner was part of the original Byrd expeditions as both a radioman and a pilot. He was some sort of anomalous brain when it came to radios, and he had a major understanding way ahead of the curve of how to set these things up. After Berkner's experience with the Antarctic program, he went to the United States government and was looking to start a program that was set up to start paying attention. And this is way back when. He wanted to set up an observation system for things coming on and off the planet, was how he put it. What the heck did he see down there that made him want this seed money? Well, it turns out that the U.S. government agreed with him, and they gave him the monies that would start this program. But they didn't start the program under the pretense for which he presented it. They gave us what was called IGY, International Geophysical Year. It's a very peculiar term that doesn't make much sense to anybody, myself included, and I worked under this umbrella title. IGY is the title of the scientific arm of all activities going on in Antarctica through all international science communities. But nobody seems to discuss what fostered it. We now operate under all this false pretense science, while all the nefarious activities that requested the money and got it approved are happening in secret. So besides the fact that this is 3 directed energy weapons systems that I found, It appears that it has a lot to do with UFO activity, whether it is our stuff or anything foreign. Back to the laser. When I went and testified in June of 2023, I had just kind of at that point deciphered the third system and presented it to both committees in DC. My birthday was only a few days after I had given this testimony, and it was amazing. The National Science Foundation has a website, of course. They can post anything they want on that website. On my birthday, apparently I still have friends in the program, on my birthday, for the first time ever, they posted a picture of the laser beam coming out of the building and firing into the sky. Somebody had sent that link to me. I almost fell out of my chair, because that right there was the program supporting what I just accused them of. So I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was a wonderful birthday present, and yeah, it was great to see. But this is basically the state of the union of the world right now. When I went to testify and I was done testifying, the conversation rapidly changed to, what do we do now that we, the people in that room, are cognizant of there being a massive amount of rogue agencies that have access to technology that most of the human population is unbeknownst of? And nobody seems to have an answer. That's the really scary thing, is that nobody seems to know who is actually in charge of this equipment down at the South Pole. Nobody seems to know who's dictating where to shoot the next earthquake at, what the laser beam is firing at, who's gathering the information and shipping it out every single day, and where is it going. Things have gotten out of control of the oversight of Congress, and thus the oversight of the American people. We need to start considering things differently. Mark Twain once said that it's a sign of higher intellect to consider an idea that you don't yet support. I'm asking everybody in this room to start considering, what do we do now that we know that these technologies have been in use for probably the greater part of the last 4 decades? What do we do as people, and making it better for our children that we're leaving this planet to, knowing that there are rogue agencies with Star Wars-like technology doing whatever they want, because if this information isn't known to the public, it's not regulated. You know, people often say, well, what are they doing with it? They're doing with it whatever they want until we reel them in. It's a very scary thing right now, but if you start to pay attention, if you look up the Havana symptoms list, and you start to pay attention to the people that you know, your own loved ones, it's very terrifying, but you're going to start to realize we're all actually suffering these symptoms. I know this because I'm familiar with it. I've been exposed to it since 2010. I know people that I have witnessed the changes. It's terrifying, but that's because I'm paying attention and I'm informed. If you actually start to pay attention to this stuff and you start realizing that we're all in the crossfire, the world is in not a good shape right now. I mean, obviously, we have wonderful politicians looking out for our best interests, right? You know, so I don't think that these people care about us at all. I don't think they want to release this very high-end technology because they're monopolizing it. It's highly lucrative. I mean, if you had a spaceship, you know, imagine how fast you could transport your product to market and what that would save you. You know, imagine if you had a spaceship and you could go out into the cosmos and you could go mine stuff that other people have to work way harder for. We have a fleet out there. Gary McKinnon told us. We have communications abilities with that fleet. We have a means to keep other people from paying attention to it. So it's a whole other way to consider the function of the world, and I'm just strongly suggesting, for the benefit of posterity, we start putting our brains in a different direction of consideration, because I hate to tell you, things are a lot worse than we've ever thought. And that's basically what I'm here to share with you folks. I am completely open to any questions that you have, because I can appreciate this is a lot to throw at you, but it's just the current state of the union.